Like, I didn't kill her physically, but in the back of my mind, she died. And I didn't even cry, not a single tear.
D4vd reacting to his girlfriend dying in his car. When the clip of David first surfaced, it seemed like just another viral moment. But everything changed once investigators pulled his girlfriend's body out of his abandoned Tesla. And with the feds trying to piece together evidence to convict David, this clip may be the evidence that puts David away for life. We've got all the gist. Let's break it down. When keeping it real goes wrong. Yo, let me put you on game about something that's been eating at the streets and got the whole internet going crazy. Picture this. Some young cat from Houston drops the hottest track of 2022, literally called Romantic Homicide, and the whole world vibes to it. We talking about David, that 20-year-old NDR, and B. Cuner who had these streets singing his pain. But the real victim here, a 15-year-old Latina shorty named Celeste Rivas Hernandez from Lake Elsinore, a small suburban spot where everybody know everybody's business until they don't. The question keeping folks up at night is simple but deadly. Was David's music just artistic expression, or was homie really laying out his murder game plan in 4K for the whole world to see? David Anthony Burke, that's David's government name, didn't come from the typical industry pipeline. Shorty wasn't getting groomed by no major label or singing at church talent shows. Nah, this cat emerged from the digital trenches like some kind of musical ghost armed with nothing but an iPhone and his sister's closet turned studio. The come-up was different, and that's what made it so real to these young folks. Romantic Homicide wasn't no manufactured hit with a team of writers and producers. This was pure bedroom confessions, raw and uncut. The kind of authenticity that cuts through all the industry BS and speaks directly to kids who feel like nobody understands their struggle. But see, that's where it gets tricky. When you build your whole brand on being the realest, most authentic voice for heartbroken teenagers, you better make sure that authenticity don't cross over into some real dangerous territory. And based on what we know now, it looks like David might have been keeping it a little too real. The mysterious persona he crafted wasn't just marketing. It was the perfect cover for someone with darker intentions. While millions of kids were streaming his pain, thinking he was just like them, homie might have been using that emotional connection to hunt for his next victim. During his big break interview on the Zach Sang Show, David broke down his creative process.
I feel like I'm more comfortable with expressing myself and connecting with people in a way that I feel is speaking, without singing. Romantic Homicide and Here With Me is like anybody could have made those songs.
Yeah, anybody could have made those songs, but not everybody ends up with a missing teenager decomposing in their Tesla. That casual way, he dismissed his violent lyrics as something universal. That's the kind of manipulation that should have had people pressing pause and asking some hard questions. While David was crafting this image of the sensitive artist who understood teenage pain, he was also building something more sinister, a hunting ground disguised as a fan community. His Discord servers became like digital trapeces, spots where vulnerable young girls could go seeking understanding and end up getting preyed on by someone who knew exactly how to exploit their emotional neediness. The setup was diabolical but effective. David positioned himself not as some distant celebrity, but as a big brother figure who'd been through the same struggles. He'd slide into conversations offering advice, emotional support, and that feeling of being understood that every lonely teenager craves. What they didn't realize was they were talking to someone who was studying their vulnerabilities like a playbook. The demographics tell the whole story. David's core fan base was teenage girls between 13, 17, kids who were dealing with depression, family problems, and all the regular struggles of growing up in suburban America. These weren't street-smart kids who could spot game from a mile away. These were suburban shorties who thought the internet was safe, and that famous people who seemed sensitive and artistic couldn't possibly be dangerous. The SH tattoo became his signature move, a way to mark his territory while making it seem like some deep artistic statement. Young girls all over the country started getting that same tattoo, thinking they were showing loyalty to an artist who understood them. What they were really doing was advertising their vulnerability to a predator who trained them to keep secrets and stay quiet about inappropriate conversations. His social media game was tight too. David knew exactly when to post for maximum impact. Late night hours when kids were up scrolling, feeling isolated and emotional. He dropped cryptic messages about feeling misunderstood, share behind-the-scenes content that made fans feel like they had special access, and occasionally respond to comments in ways that made individual followers feel chosen and special. This wasn't accidental. This was a calculated campaign to create the perfect hunting ground disguised as an artistic community where young fans could connect with their idol. The artistic angle provided perfect cover, too. When David wrote songs about violence or death, when he created music videos featuring murdered women, when he posted cryptic messages that seemed dark or disturbing, it could all be dismissed as artistic expression. Anyone who questioned whether this content was appropriate for someone with a primarily teenage fan base could be shut down as not understanding art or being too conservative to appreciate complex creative work. The suburban princess who got caught up. Let's keep it 100 about Celeste Rivas Hernandez. Shorty wasn't some naive little girl who didn't know the world could be dangerous. She was a smart, creative 15-year-old from Lake Elsinore who had dreams bigger than her small-town reality and the kind of artistic soul that made her both special and vulnerable. But in a world where predators dress up like Prince Charming and slide through social media, even the smartest kids can get caught slipping. Celeste was born September 7, 2009 into a tight-knit Latino family that worked hard to give their kids opportunities in the suburbs of California. Standing 5 feet 1 inch in and weighing about 120 pounds with wavy brown hair and expressive brown eyes, she carried herself like someone who knew she was destined for something bigger than Lake Elsinore had to offer. Her vibe was pure Gen Z, TikTok-influenced style, a red ink shinger that she rocked like a badge of honor, and the kind of creative energy that made teachers pay attention and friends gravitate toward her. Neighbors described her as outgoing but vulnerable. That perfect combination that makes someone magnetic, but also marks them as potential prey. See, Celeste wasn't just another suburban teenager scrolling through social media. She was a gifted writer and artist who saw the world differently than her peers. Teachers remembered her as the kid who turned in creative writing assignments that were so mature and emotionally complex they seemed written by someone twice her age. But that same sensitivity that made her such a talented artist also made her a perfect target for someone who knew how to weaponize empathy and exploit the trust of creative kids seeking mentorship and understanding. The shadow tattoo became a recurring element in her posts, sometimes featured prominently, other times appearing as a subtle detail in larger compositions. What looked like typical teenage rebellion and artistic expression to her family would later become crucial evidence in understanding her connection to David. But there were signs that something was shifting in Celeste's digital behavior in the months before she disappeared. Friends noticed she was becoming more secretive about her online interactions, more protective of her phone, more likely to deflect questions about who she was talking to. With increasing frequency, looking back, the warning signs were there, but they looked like normal teenage behavior to adults who didn't understand how predators operate in digital spaces. Celeste started spending more time on her phone, staying up later, becoming more emotionally volatile in ways that seemed tied to her online interactions. Her best friend, who asked to remain anonymous because David fans have been sending death threats, described watching Celeste change from someone who was open about her crushes and relationships to someone who became secretive and defensive when asked about her romantic life. The friend noticed Celeste becoming obsessed with checking messages, interrupting conversations to respond to texts with an urgency that seemed way out of proportion to normal teenage communication. When pushed about who required such immediate responses, Celeste would get defensive and change the subject, behavior that was completely different from her usually open personality. More concerning were the extreme mood swings that seemed directly connected to her phone usage. She'd be euphoric after receiving certain messages, then devastated when responses were delayed or when her phone died. Her family started noticing her staying up late, hearing her typing into the night when she should have been sleeping. These changes accelerated in the weeks before her disappearance. Celeste became increasingly isolated from her local friend group, canceling plans and showing less interest in activities she'd previously loved. She started talking about feeling like she was meant for something bigger and wanting to start fresh. Language that in hindsight suggests someone was filling her head with promises about a different life. Her mother, Maria Hernandez, later revealed that Celeste had mentioned dating someone named David, but was evasive about details whenever the family tried to learn more about this mysterious boyfriend. In a suburban community where teenagers' relationships were usually pretty transparent to their families, this secrecy should have been a bigger red flag. April 5, 2024 started normal enough for the Hernandez family. Celeste seemed excited about her movie night with her older brother, Matthew, a weekly tradition they'd maintained since middle school. She spent extra time getting ready, choosing her outfit with the kind of care usually reserved for important occasions rather than casual family time. The gray pants, black sweater, hat, and Hello Kitty sandals she chose reflected the complex identity she was navigating. Part sophisticated teenager trying to project maturity, part kid who still found joy in cartoon characters. It was an outfit that perfectly captured who Celeste was at 15. Caught between childhood and adulthood, trying to figure out where she fit in the world. Matthew pulled up to their meeting spot at exactly 7:00 p.m. expecting to find his sister waiting with her usual complaints about being hungry or her excitement about the horror movie they'd been planning to see. Instead, he found an empty park in a phone that went straight to voicemail with every call. The timeline of that night tells a story that gets more disturbing the closer you look at it. Celeste had posted a selfie around 6 p.m. with the caption, "Movie night with my bro." But she never made it to that meeting. Somewhere in that hour between posting about her plans and the time she was supposed to meet Matthew, something happened that changed everything. The initial response was what you'd expect. Maybe she was running late. Maybe she forgot. Maybe something came up. But as minutes turned to hours and calls went unanswered, the family's concern escalated into something approaching panic. Maria Hernandez's maternal instincts told her immediately that something was seriously wrong. The search began that night and continued for over 16 months. The Hernandez family plastered missing person flyers throughout Lake Elsinore, organized search parties, and used social media to spread awareness about Celeste's disappearance. They had no way of knowing that their daughter was already dead or that her body would eventually be found in the car of the very artist whose music had soundtracked her final months. Celeste's disappearance exposed some harsh truths about how missing teenagers are treated by law enforcement, especially kids from working-class Latino families in suburban communities. The initial classification as a runaway rather than a potential abduction reflected both resource limitations and biases that potentially cause crucial investigative time. The statistics make it clear why cops might default to assuming teenage disappearances are voluntary. Hundreds of thousands of young people are reported missing every year, and most eventually come home safe. But this triage system fails to account for the unique vulnerabilities that make teenagers attractive targets for predators, especially in the digital age. One detail that haunts everyone who follows this case is how Maria Hernandez had mentioned months before the body was discovered that Celeste was dating someone named David. At the time, it seemed like normal teenage romance, a boyfriend that parents hadn't met yet, which is pretty typical for suburban 15-year-olds. But when Celeste's decomposed body was found in the Tesla registered to David Anthony Burke, that casual mention of a boyfriend named David took on chilling significance. The timing, the secrecy, the behavioral changes, everything suddenly made sense in the worst possible way. When the truth hit different. By September 2025, over 16 months after Celeste vanished, her case had gone cold in the public consciousness. The family was still pushing for answers, still hoping for a miracle, but the media had moved on to newer tragedies. Then came the discovery that would blow up the internet and turn a missing person case into one of the most shocking celebrity scandals in recent memory. September 8, 2025. Workers at Hollywood Tow on North Mansfield Avenue were just doing their regular routine when they caught a whiff of something that made them want to throw up. That unmistakable smell of death was seeping out of a black Tesla Model 3 that had been sitting in their lot probably for weeks. In LA, expensive cars get abandoned all the time. Breakdowns, repo situations, rich kids who crash daddy's whip and just walk away. Nobody thought twice about another Tesla collecting dust. But when that California heat intensified the stench coming from the trunk, everybody knew they were dealing with something way more serious than a parking violation. When LAPD forced that trunk open, they found a scene straight out of a horror movie wrapped in black plastic was a human body decomposed so badly it only weighed 71 pounds, about half what 15-year-old Celeste had weighed when she disappeared. The level of decay suggested she'd been dead for months, which meant she was probably killed around the time she vanished. But even with all that decomposition, certain details survived that would crack the case wide open. The clothing matched exactly what Celeste was wearing the night she disappeared. White tube top, black leggings, yellow chain bracelet, stud earrings, and there it was, still visible on what remained of her right index finger, that red ink, __. The car registration revealed a name that sent shockwaves through the music industry and the internet. David Anthony Burke, better known as David, the NDR&V sensation whose song Romantic Homicide had been streaming in bedrooms and cars across America for the past 3 years. For Maria Hernandez, the call from investigators was the phone call every parent of a missing child dreads, but also secretly hopes for final answers, even when those answers are the worst possible news. After 16 months of uncertainty, false leads, and sleepless nights, she finally knew what happened to her baby girl. "I knew it was my baby." The description matched everything, Maria told reporters, her voice cracking as she spoke about receiving the news that ended her months of hoping for Celeste's safe return. The identification process was handled with extraordinary care given the condition of the remains. Dental records provided the primary confirmation, backed up by DNA analysis and that distinctive tattoo. But it was the yellow chain bracelet, a gift from Matthew for her 15th birthday, that really broke the family's hearts and confirmed what they already knew in their guts. Matthew's reaction hit different when he realized his sister's murder was connected to a global celebrity. "She was on her way to see a movie with me, but never came back. We knew she knew David, but this," he told reporters, his words capturing the surreal nature of discovering that his sister's death involved someone whose music millions of people knew. When news broke about the body in his Tesla, David's team moved fast to establish his whereabouts and create distance between him and the crime. His legal squad released detailed tour schedules, flight records, and hotel receipts designed to prove he wasn't in LA when the body was discovered. At the time, investigators found Celeste's remains. David was performing in Minneapolis as part of his We World tour with his next show scheduled in Seattle. This alibi was solid for the immediate time frame, but it raised bigger questions about when exactly the body had been placed in the vehicle and whether David had helped or had disposed of the body much earlier. His management released a carefully crafted statement that emphasized cooperation while avoiding any admission of responsibility. David has been informed about what's happened, and although he is still out on tour, he is fully cooperating with the authorities. But David's personal response told a completely different story. After posting a cryptic 67 in on social media, numbers that sent his fan base into overdrive trying to decode their meaning, he went ghost on all platforms. The contrast between his team's professional cooperation and his personal disappearance from social media suggested someone who was struggling to maintain his composure under pressure. The immediate cancellation of his Seattle show cited unforeseen circumstances. And within 48 hours, major brands started quietly cutting ties. Crocs and Hollister pulled advertising campaigns featuring David while streaming platforms began flagging his content with warnings about the ongoing investigation. Once news broke about the connection between David and Celeste's murder, social media turned into the world's largest crime scene investigation. Twitter, TikTok, Instagram, and Reddit became battlegrounds where millions of amateur detectives analyzed every piece of available evidence and created theories that ranged from plausible to completely unhinged. The timing coincidences alone were enough to drive conspiracy theorists into overdrive. David's music video for Romantic Homicide was released on September 7, 2022, Celeste's 13th birthday. The video featured his blindfolded character shooting an on-screen girlfriend before cradling her lifeless body in the rain. Imagery that now seemed disturbingly prophetic. Internet sleuths began frame-by-frame analysis of every David music video, noting that the actress chosen to play his victim in Romantic Homicide bore a striking resemblance to Celeste. Similar hair texture, comparable build, even some facial features that seemed too coincidental to ignore. The staging of the death scene, with the victim's body carefully positioned and the killer showing no emotion, eerily paralleled how investigators believed Celeste's body had been prepared for concealment. But the real fuel for online speculation came from the alleged Discord conversations and the leaked track titled Celeste that started circulating on social media platforms. Screenshots of supposed conversations between David and a user named Celeste began spreading, though their authenticity couldn't be verified. The alleged Discord logs dating back to 2022, when Celeste was just 12 years old, showed what appeared to be classic grooming behavior. David allegedly positioning himself as an understanding mentor, gradually isolating his target from other relationships, encouraging secrecy about their communications, and slowly escalating to more inappropriate topics. The leaked demo titled Celeste, supposedly recorded in December 2023, just months before her disappearance, allegedly contained lyrics about innocence lost and a girl who slipped away. One particularly damning line allegedly described red ink promises that can't be broken, potentially referencing the shadow both David and Celeste shared. The SH tattoo connection became the most debated piece of evidence in the case. Both David and Celeste had the same design in the same red ink on their right index finger, leading to intense speculation about what it meant and whether it proved a direct relationship between them. Supporters of David argued that the tattoo was common among celebrities and influencers, pointing to similar designs worn by everyone from Rihanna to Lindsay Lohan. They claimed the shared tattoo was pure coincidence. Just two people independently choosing a popular design. The discovery of Celeste's body transformed David's entire musical catalog from entertainment into potential criminal evidence. Every lyric, every music video, every social media post was suddenly being analyzed not as artistic expression, but as possible confession or foreshadowing of real violence. Romantic Homicide became the centerpiece of speculation about his guilt. Lines like, "In the back of my mind, you died and I didn't even cry." No, not a single tear. Suddenly read like literal confession rather than metaphorical description of emotional numbness after breakups. Critics pointed out that the song's success had been built on millions of listeners identifying with what they thought were metaphorical descriptions of heartbreak. The possibility that these
It's all of them. I try to include a piece of myself in every part of the music, but I try to get like every different perspective I can, every possible perspective, every possible like viewpoint.
This explanation, which had seemed like artistic maturity when it was first recorded, now raised disturbing questions about what perspectives David was actually exploring and how much of himself he was really including in songs about murder and violence. His description of building a cinematic universe with antagonists and protagonists took on sinister implications when viewed through the lens of actual criminal behavior.
But the 4 is like, I replaced the A with it, took out the I. And the 4 is like an ongoing D4vd lore. Like it's 4 universes with all these different characters.
Oh, interesting.
I'm building out this like cinematic universe. In the future is going to be like a whole bunch of different stuff. I can't spoil too much now, but it's like I got this blindfold character that you see in my music videos. That's gonna expand into like these different antagonists and protagonists and like a whole anime thing. It's gonna be crazy. It's gonna be crazy.
Critics argued that David had used his artistic persona as cover for planning real violence, creating a fictional framework that would provide plausible deniability for actual criminal behavior. The blindfolded character that appeared throughout his visual content rather than representing artistic vision might have symbolized his desire to remain unseen while committing acts of violence. The response to David's case split along predictable lines in hip-hop and urban communities. Some saw it as another example of a young black artist being railroaded by a system that's always ready to assume the worst about successful black men. Others argued that the evidence was too overwhelming to ignore and that protecting abusers in the name of racial solidarity only perpetuated harm against vulnerable young women. The conversation got particularly heated around the role of artistic expression in criminal cases. Hip-hop has a long history of artists facing legal consequences for lyrical content that prosecutors argue represents confession or evidence of criminal intent. Many in the culture saw the David case as potentially setting dangerous precedents for how violent artistic content could be used against black artists in criminal proceedings. But the counterargument was just as real. When your art perfectly predicts a real murder, when your lyrics describe exactly what happened to an actual victim, when your music videos seem to rehearse the crime you're accused of committing, that's not artistic expression anymore. That's evidence. The generational divide was sharp too. Older heads who grew up understanding that rap was often fiction, that artists played characters and told stories that weren't necessarily autobiographical, were more willing to separate David's music from the criminal allegations. But younger listeners, particularly those in David's core demographic, had developed different relationships with artists who built their brands on authenticity and emotional vulnerability. The most loyal fans organized harassment campaigns against anyone who suggested David might be guilty, sending death threats. To journalists covering the case, to internet users who shared incriminating evidence, and even to Celeste's family members who spoke publicly about seeking justice for their daughter. Beyond the specifics of David's case lies a broader reckoning about how hip-hop and social media culture handles the protection of young fans, particularly young women, from predatory behavior by powerful figures within the community. The music industry's historical failure to protect young women from exploitation by male artists is well documented from R. Kelly to countless other cases that never made headlines. But the digital age has amplified both the scale of potential predation and the tools available for grooming vulnerable fans. Whether David's music was prophecy, confession, or just tragic coincidence, one thing is certain. Celeste Rivas Hernandez deserved better than the fate she received. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this.